Welcome to the BEASTwriter family, where social media engagement is encouraged. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we have the honor and privilege again to meet with my man, good friend, Randy Mueller of Mueller Football Advising. Randy, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. My pleasure to be back with you. Thanks for having me back, I should say.
Hey, we would have you on more often, but I know you're a busy guy, so I wanted to respect your time, and I thank you for hopping on. I know you got a podcast coming up at 5 p.m., so we're just going to go ahead and break down a little bit about what's going on as far as the pulse around the NFL, some news, thoughts, and really breaking news. Let's start with the John Gruden firing. Were you shocked at all at how this all transpired? And from a GM perspective, how do you kind of transform the locker room dynamic that's basically shaken up with losing the loss of the head coach?
Well, I think, we were all surprised by, the emails themselves and what was said in them. I mean, obviously it was appalling and everything you've heard. I mean, you can't condone any of it. So obviously something was going to happen. I spend my time maybe as a conspiracist thinking about whose agenda was at work here, how certain emails leaked out, how others didn't. But the bottom line is Mark Davis had to move on. I mean, you couldn't run a team with this kind of stuff, even if it happened 8 or 10 years ago. It doesn't really matter. It was wrong, and it's something that John's going to probably struggle to overcome in his professional life for sure. But yeah, as a GM, having been in that seat a couple different times, it's one of people's skills and of mending fences. And I think I would have probably had to meet with players individually to make sure they know where we stand as an organization. The good thing about the Raiders is they have a history of positive inclusion. They have the first African-American head coach, the first Latino head coach, the first female CEO, so they have a history of, the opposite things of what John Gruden said. So I think that part can be overcome. I think one of the things, that might people don't realize is that I think they can actually come out of this ahead. They've struggled for 3 or 4 years. John really, as a team builder and as a GM, and I know he didn't have the title, but in these roles, he had never had experience doing this before. So it's one of those things where he took on a giant role. And yeah, Mike Mayock has the GM title, but he worked for John, right? So
Right.
Mike's really the personnel director, regardless of title. So I think John really had struggled in his skill set, in his wheelhouse. John, the GM, got John, the head coach, in trouble from a football standpoint. So setting all the emails and all the issues aside, there weren't a good football team. So I think they can possibly turn this thing around, come out ahead with some leadership, with some compassion, with some, humility involved with everybody. I think it could be a positive for them going forward.
Now, changing things up. I mean, I think it could be a blessing in disguise. Like you said, you always have to look at the glass as half full, not half empty. Do you count on the team captains to kind of individually bring the locker room together? Because I know from a GM perspective, it's like, yeah, you're the GM and you oversee everything, but sometimes hearing it from a player's voice directly has a direct impact on the players rather than a GM or rather than a coach.
Right.
So would you, in your mind, would you sit down with the team captains, whoever they are, and say, hey, look, like, this is what we're trying to do here. I know it's a tough time. Like that's a huge thing other than, I mean, football aside, this is like a real issue that probably got people, effed up in the mind. Like, they're probably screwed up. Like, all this time they thought John Gruden was somebody else. And then this came to light, and now their perception of everything, take case in point, Max Crosby, or not Max Crosby, excuse me. Who was the gosh, I can't name the player. Some of these players had to have days off because of what happened to them. So where does mentally, it's more like a mental health concern rather than, anything else. Emotionally, do you have to have some kind of, have psychiatrists in there to kind of work out the key? Like, that's a huge thing that I think, we're tapping something that really no one talks about.
Right. Two things come to mind. First, the really people in the emails who were offended, you have to find a way to immediately reach those people. If they're in your life anywhere, and forget about football, if this is just in the real world, if something like that comes out and you have some people in your life who have the beliefs of, and were offended by some of the things John said, My first temptation is to reach out to them right away and make sure they know how we feel, make sure they know that we have a lot more in common than we don't. And these people are, and Brandon Staley said this, the head coach of the Chargers last week, and I thought it was outstanding. He said that group of people, they're already skeptical, they're already hard to trust because of the stigma that has been attached to some of their beliefs. And I just think you've got to find a way to attach to them. The other thing is, as the leader of the team, as a GM, or really as a head coach for that matter, you can't start to develop a relationship through this. You had better have one ahead of time. And I always took it upon myself to have those captains meetings, have those one-on-one discussions, not necessarily formally, but informally throughout the whole time of having that job. You have to have a pulse on your team. You have to communicate with the leaders. You have to communicate with all of them. I was always available and enjoyed the dialogue with those guys. This goes back to some of the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson requests of having influence on the personnel side and answering questions regarding should they have input. It's the same thing. You have to have a dialogue with those guys. The days of a GM sitting in a room, shutting the door and picking players, they're over. That's never the case now. There are so many other things you have to be aware of and deal with on a bigger picture, bigger scope, that this is just an extension of that. But it's not going to be viewed as being sincere if you haven't had this relationship prior to. You've got to have a legitimate, sincere, caring relationship with as many as you can to get you through times like this. I don't know where John was in that regard. John, to me, kind of became a caricature, so to speak, more than an interpersonal feelings guy. That's just not John. But I've always felt like you have to have that open dialogue with these guys. And I think maybe Mike Mayock had that. Maybe some others there. I know Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach, guaranteed had this with a lot of players. So I think he's the perfect guy for them to turn to in going forward. I think Rich, as a special teams guy, touched probably as many players on that team as any coach in the locker room. So he's a natural for me.
Question for you. How come anytime there's an interim coach, it usually is a special teams coach? Is that because usually players get their start on special teams and they have a broader knowledge of all three phases rather than going for a D coordinator? Because, I mean, if you look at it, the logical choice would be the Raiders defensive coordinator to be the head coach because he was a head coach. So why not go for a guy like Gus Bradley, right? Rather than the special teams coach?
Well, I think twofold. One, yes, special teams touches every element of the team, all positions. And I know Rich. I worked with Rich with the Chargers for several years. He is a very good communicator. He's very good with the players. There's a great give and take. Rich is one of those guys where he can demand and kick him in the butt, and 5 minutes later, they're hugging him. That's a hard trait to find. So that's good. Not that Gus wouldn't, but putting Rich in charge allows Gus to do what he does, allows Greg Olsen to do what he does on offense, and I think have the least amount of adjusting throughout the whole process of putting your team on the field. So I think those guys, the offense doesn't change, the defense doesn't change. Special teams, yeah, Rich can find a way to continue to do that. But to me, he was the natural fit, one, for personality, and two, because of his job description, really touching all the parts of the team.
That's a great insight. That's great insight. I don't think too many people know about what you just touched on. So thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move on. Being a GM at this phase in the season, week 7, what type of things do you look for and evaluate during this time?
Well, we've got a trade deadline coming up for one thing. Week 8 is now the new trade deadline. It was week 6 for many, many years. So if I'm the GM, I'm always looking to see what's available, always looking to improve our team some way or another. You can do it less now through the waiver period, waivers, because teams have 16-man practice squads now. So everybody that I don't want to slight anybody, but everybody that can walk and chew gum is on a practice squad already. So it's not like you're going to get guys cut free anyplace else. So your replacements for your own team too come from within that practice squad for the most part. So trades, I think, are a little more prevalent now. After 6 weeks, the trade deadline was week 6 for many, many years, and it would take you all of 6 weeks to know your team. I always felt like we're never going to make a trade because 5 or 6 weeks, we don't even know what our strengths and weaknesses are yet. Well, now they've extended that to week 8. So I do think you'll see teams that are more active. You clearly know your team better after 8 weeks. There's a bigger window to make these deals. And And it seems like teams are willing to trade and maneuver cap money now more than ever before. So I think those are things that occupy your time as a GM. The other thing is now at this point in the season, your scouts have been on the road for 2 months. They have a pretty good, clear picture now of college talent, what will be available in the draft. So I would always bring our scouts in, meet with them for a couple of days, just take their pulse on some of the better players they've seen, and then kind of set my schedule for November and the first part of December in that I want to go see some of these guys.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on the road and I'm going to wait till they sort them out because I don't have time to go everywhere. But I want to see the top guys at positions of need that we have. And most of that has been, decided at least with one or two opinions by this point. So you have plenty going on, that's for sure.
That's good. That's another good insight because that's what a lot of GMs do, or the good GMs. Some GMs don't, though. I mean, I've heard GMs
right.
they don't want to do the legwork, but some GMs like Kevin Colbert from the Pittsburgh Steelers does it. He does exactly what you do. And you see him at all-star games. It's been reported that he's at this, the championship games, the SEC championship games, whatever games based on what the team's needs are. And they really count on those top scouts. Now, let's peel back a layer of the onion to get to the core when we talk about the scouting department. So when you talk about people that you trust in your scouting department, who are those head guys? Is it the director of college? I know it's obviously a whole monster that we're talking about, but do you really lean on the director of college scouting? Do you lean on the VPOP, vice president of player personnel, or do you lean on the regional scout? Like if you're going to scout the SEC, let's say you're going to scout Will Anderson, who's not coming out, hypothetically till the year after next year, because he's only a sophomore. But let's say Will Anderson is the guy you're scouting out of Alabama, top edge rusher. And let's say hypothetically he's coming out of this year's draft. Would you count on the regional scout more so than the director of college scouting to get that kind of input? Or do you take both of theirs and then say, okay, well, the evaluation process is this?
Well, I think everybody does it a little different, but I always wanted to talk to the scouts directly. I'll be honest with you. The college director, in my mind, is the administrator of the scouts. He's not going to help me as much as these regional scouts that have been there 2 or 3 times have already gathered. That information is sacred. I don't really want it filtered down through anybody else. A lot of times your college director, like I said, administrates, but yet he takes their information and kind of, over the top scouts. I want to know the basics, the behind the scenes stuff, and those guys are going to get it. When I was the GM, I'd make a point that I had a conference call with each individual scout at least once every other week. And that may be only 15 or 20 minutes, but I thought it was important 2 hours of my time to hear them out and to find out exactly where the players are. So I always had with me a go-to evaluator with me in the office. Whatever you can call him whatever you want. He can be the player personnel director. He could be the assistant GM. But I want another guy that I know exactly how he evaluates, and he knows exactly what we're looking for. I can't look at everybody. I can't get everywhere and see it all. Even if it's pro guys on tape in the office, I can't do it all. Yeah. So I want one guy who I can say, hey, Rick, go look at this guy. Yeah, I got to find out exactly what you think of this guy, because then I got to make a decision based on something else. So you have your pro guys looking at all the pro guys. You have your college guys looking at the college guys. But I think over the top, another guy besides the GM who can look at both to not only evaluate, but to value players, especially on the pro side. And there's a difference because money's involved when you're making deals in pro. Right. For pro players, cap money, salary cap money. I'd like another guy's opinion on those prospects that we're talking about around the league.
That's good insight. And I like your thinking on not going directly to the director of college scouting, but actually talking to the regional scout who, like you said, probably has the strongest pulse of any other region because that's the region they cover. So they're going to
They're the GM of their own region.
They are. And they have their own network that they have. So they have a lot of intel that maybe the director of college scouting doesn't have. Because like you just said, being the GM, you oversee everything. You can't be in all places at once. Same thing applies to the director of college scouting. They can't be in the Pac-12 and then scout the SEC and then go to the Big Ten. And it's just ridiculous. So I like how you do that. And having a 15-minute phone call, I think that puts a personal touch too with the scouts who maybe not, a lot of times these low-level scouts, they want to feel like they're somebody. And I think you give them a platform by trusting their input. And I think that says a lot about you being in a management perspective. Me being a management major is like, hey, look, like I value you, you need to be valued and I value your input. So That really resonates with me, and I think you do a really good job at that. So that's the first time I ever heard a GM actually take the time, 15 to 20 minutes every other week, to go ahead and talk. I mean, that's a lot of due diligence that you're doing.
It is, but I think it's important that they get heard. I think it's
Yeah,
important, like you said, that they know they're an important cog
right.
and that their opinions and information isn't filtered through somebody else. Why not give it right to the main decision maker? So I just think that's the way to do it. Again, it's really managing people. When you get to the GM chair, everybody thinks all you do is pick players. I'm going to tell you what, 80% of the time you're managing people and
Yes.
putting a group together and keeping us on the rails so that we don't go off, on a tangent. That's for sure.
And you have to manage the different personalities too, because in that scouting department, you have people with different types of egos, different types of personalities. How do you motivate another person? How do you get some guy to do something that he doesn't want to do? So it's a whole, and that's just the scouting side. You're not even talking about the players. So
or the coaches. It's a people managing job any way you look at it.
It is. And it's not as easy as people. And that's the thing with fans. I feel like they always take a look at the draft and be like, oh, well, this GM sucks because of how they drafted. But it's like, there's a whole pro personnel side. Like, did they do well in going in the pro personnel side and picking up free agents and then signing them to, lucrative contracts that they were worthy or not worthy of, and then now you're tied to dead money. And how does that affect the 5-year outlook? I mean, these are things that you have to look at. And so that's why when I always analyze GMs, I always take it in a 3-step phase. I talk about the scouts, talk about the scouting department, obviously, but then talk about the draft and then talk about the pro personnel side. Because a lot of people, they just look at the household names at what we see on NFL Network, all these players that are signed. But what about the low level free agents that turn out to be bargain rate starters?
Right.
And they help your team become a playoff caliber team. Like a boundary cornerback in today's age of the NFL with the pass happy NFL is so valuable today than in years past, because again, the leagues are all dictated toward the offense. But again, when you find those bargain, I mean, you were 2000 GM of the year back with the New Orleans Saints. I remember I was back in high school and I hated you for it because I was a diehard. No, I really did. I was like, dude, you're good. But I was like, dang it. Like the Saints, really? Like what the heck, the Saints? And I was like, oh man, the Niners. But then you actually took players and you built your team focusing on, and correct me if I'm wrong, focusing on what the weaknesses within the division were. And you catapulted on your team's strengths on that team. That 2000 team, who was your running backs? Were who? Who are your running backs on that team? Was it?
Well, they had drafted Ricky Williams, so we ended up with a couple other guys. We drafted a Chad Morton in the second year. We drafted Deuce McAllister one of my years. So we had some good ones, that's for sure. Yeah,
Deuce McAllister, that was a good one. Yeah, I liked him.
Yep.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on. But yeah, you did a really good job.
Thank you.
And I hated you for it. I was like, dang it.
That's right. We were all in the same division back then.
Yes.
The Chiefs or the Saints and the 49ers and the Rams. We were in the NFC West. So
yeah. And the Falcons. The Falcons were in the division.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a fun division back then. All right. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I want to touch base on them. There's a lot of talk on Inside the NFL on NFL Network when it comes to Big Ben. He's been highly criticized this year. Do you think that's fair with this young, inexperienced, yet talented offensive line?
I think some of the criticism is fair. I think some of it is misguided in that I'm not sure it's all on Ben. Yeah, they started 2 rookie offensive linemen the last few weeks, so a center and a left tackle. That's enough. They also have an offensive coordinator that's in his first year of being a coordinator in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. There's a learning curve there too. And I don't know that there's a long, successful track record of what Matt Canada has done in college that transferred over. So there's some issues there. He was Ben's quarterback coach a year ago, so I'm sure Ben had a lot of input in that. And maybe that's one of the reasons he got the job. So Ben didn't have to learn something new. I think there's a lot of finger pointing and probably a little bit of blame to be shared throughout that organization when it comes to this. One of the reasons that Ben is they are where they are with Ben is they just didn't have any other options. They redid his contract last year so that he could come back for 1 year. My thought is if they had had any options at all, they may have turned to him. They weren't solid on the guys on their roster. They weren't going to be able to draft one picking where they were. There was no free agents that just jumped out at them as being an upgrade over Ben. So they had no options. So they punted. They re-signed Ben and to an extension that really means this is going to be his last year. But having said that, they're 3-3. I think they're an average team. I don't think they're going anywhere this year as much as I it's pain to say that because I think Mike Tomlin's really good. At some point this year, they're going to have a tough decision to make because they may have to pull the plug on Ben and look at these other guys that they have, at least to try to get as much of an information stockpile as they can before the season ends. Now, I'm not saying it anytime soon. At 3-3, they're in the hunt. Hey, if they're in around 500 at Thanksgiving, they're still in the playoff hunt.
Right.
So we've got a long ways to go, but the page has definitely started to be turned. I don't think it's been dropped on them yet, but Ben is showing signs of there's not a lot of tread left on that tire for sure.
I think we're in the same line of thinking, and this is my thoughts. After watching coaches film, like I tell you, I watch coaches film 65, 70 plus hours a week, and I'm not joking. I'm being serious.
I'm respectful of that. I understand that. That's how I spend my time too. So that's good.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. Matt Canada, talking about his offensive philosophy when I watch coaches film, it's very stagnant. Like, I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm not saying I can get the job done because I can't, because I've never been a coordinator, never had a coordinating position. But what I see from what his offense does, similar to what other NFL teams do, as I scout all 16 games every single week, it's one of the most vanilla offenses that you'll ever see. You see 7, 8, 9 bangers from the split end. That's a guarantee. And then you run these 2 shallow crossing routes with the slot receiver, whether it be Deontay Johnson's or a speed out. There's no real, when it comes to the passing game, there's no real, how should I say it? I have a term, and excuse my language, but it's called fuga. It's called fuck up the gray area. Meaning,
yeah, I hear you.
Okay, meaning you have to run your receivers behind the curl hook or curl flat defender in that gray area. So if he's not the deepest deep, which he thinks he is, because the tight end's running down that seam, and then all of a sudden that wide receiver is running behind him on the post route, that's where you see the Sean McVays, the Kyle Shanahans, the John Grudens being so valuable because they know how to fuga their way into their advantage. You don't see that with Matt Kenyatta, and you see it with a lot of different offenses, but not with his, because at the end of the day, like you said, there's not so much body of work to go from. And I think you're right. I think Big Ben had a big influence on him getting that job, because at the end of the day, at this day and age, let's face it, Big Ben doesn't want to learn a new offense. He's at that age.
Right. Well, I hear you. From my standpoint, and far be it for me to criticize an offensive coordinator, because I'm like you, I've never been in that chair.
Right.
But I think I've been around it enough to know the difference between calling plays and running a system. And this may come up later in our discussion if we follow the track that you sent me. But at this point, I think I see a lot of plays being called in Pittsburgh. I just don't know that I see a system in place that if they do this, then we have an answer for that. I don't see Ben, and I feel bad for him. I don't see a lot of answers to the tests, right? He's got one read. He's got a simple read here. If our offense is that simple, guess what? They don't have to work hard to defend it. So I don't see the same things I see with, like you said, McVay or even some of these younger guys, even Shanahan, even some of those things. There's a system there that I can see what plays build off other plays. I just see a bunch of plays being called right now in Pittsburgh. So that's just my take.
No, we're on the same wavelength. I like using that term because we are. And if I'm seeing it and you're seeing it, there's other coordinators who are freaking seeing it, dude. Like, if I'm a defensive coordinator, which I'm not, I'll just be like, hey, you know what? We can just play a cover 3 and just defend it, and keep everything in front, have a box, defender, our string safety coming up, and we'll be okay. Because Big Ben, let's be honest, he's not as accurate with the deep ball as he once was. And to fit it in that close window and I'll be honest, in my grading system, Minkah Fitzpatrick is graded out as average in my grading system. He's not the same player, which is surprising because he's in the contract year. He just doesn't have the deep range that I expected him to have, that we expected him to have from 2019 to 2020 and then 2021. I don't know if that's a byproduct of the lack of defensive front 7 talent, because let's face it, Tyson Alualu is out. Stephon Tuitt hasn't seen the field yet. So again, defensive front 7, we talk about building teams from the inside out, not the outside in. But at the end of the day, it's almost like we know what we're getting when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, whether it be offense or defense. Let's talk about Naji Harris. That's my draft crush. I love Naji Harris. People were down on Naji Harris. They said he didn't have the breakaway speed. They said there's too much wear and tear on his tires, and I kind of shot that down with going back in previous drafts and look at all these people that had, X plus carries. What is your take on Naji Harris? I mean, the guy's just a bowling pin to bring down. But
Right.
what are your thoughts as a GM?
Well, here's the thing, and everybody talks about running backs being devalued and you should never pick one in the first round, blah, blah, blah. But having said that, I think some of us viewed Naji Harris as more than a runner. He did a lot of other things, and I think he could be a weapon. And if you get a chance to add a weapon, then that adds to the value of drafting one in the first round. I don't know what the other options were for them at that point, but it makes sense to me that here is a big, strong back who can do a lot of things of which they had none. So they were going to upgrade their running game. I think he can give them some in the passing game. They split him out last week in the slot a couple times and ran him underneath against Bobby Wagner, and he was effective. So I think they can do some of that. I don't think we've seen the widest array of things that Naji Harris will do. In the future, he'll be a bigger part of that. But I saw value in him. I like him as a player. I think he's a really good player. I guess the difference is, and we talk about the two young offensive linemen up front for me. These two guys, the center and the left tackle, one was drafted in the 3rd round, one in the 4th round this year. Correct. They're a little light in the ass. They're a little position finesse type guys, which really isn't the Steeler way. So this isn't your dad's Steelers. This is our Steelers now, right? So this is the way I think their philosophy, their strategies got to be changed a little bit because they have athleticism, but they're not going to knock anybody back. And Naji Harris is a runner that I think you want to have some people knock back when he comes downhill. So there's a little, I don't know about the fit yet, but I think that the two young offensive linemen will get bigger. They'll get stronger. The best thing about them is they'll be sophomores next year, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is they'll mature physically. They'll get to be men and be bigger and stronger. But right now they're fighting their butts off just to sustain contact. But they aren't knocking anybody back. Therefore, the holes and the decisions that Naji makes as a runner are being made probably a yard deeper in the backfield than everybody would like them to be. And that's been a toll on the running game as well.
That's a great point. You talk about the fit. So I think what we're talking about, you talk about finesse, you think more of a West Coast style of an offensive lineman, more athletic, guys who can hit the second level with ease. The throwback Pittsburgh Steelers is a power-based freaking run scheme, right? It's like between the tackles, I don't care, mano, e-mano, we're not going to down block. We're just going to go mano, e-mano, heads up. We're not going to try to combo. It's just go heads up. Let's go. And I'll get it. I'll get it there, ground and pound. I agree with you. I think Kendrick Green is light in the ass, as you say. And when you mean light in the ass, you mean he's like lighter. Like he's just a lighter type of
smaller guy. Yeah, plays smaller.
He doesn't have a bubble butt, right? He doesn't have that bubble butt. Like, for instance, let's talk about the Niners. Aaron Banks, when he got drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, when they traded back, I believe it was from 43 to 48 with the Las Vegas Raiders, and they picked up Aaron Banks. I said that was a bad scheme fit for the San Francisco 49ers because he was a more tailor-based for a power-based run scheme. I even said that he was more tailor-made for the Pittsburgh Steelers type of a scheme. He's been a healthy scratch. He hasn't even seen game time up to this point as a second-round pick. And then you see it with the Pittsburgh Steelers who are going on with a new look kind of a Steelers with a more finesse type of a offensive line. Do you think that more is more by design or more because the talent level along the offensive line in this year's draft class was not the strongest?
Well, I think it's definitely about fit. I think that has something to do with how quick these guys get in the lineup. I think some of it is about how quickly you can learn the system. And depending on where you come from college, it might be as simple as you have to forget everything you learned before and reprogram them. So that takes some time. And then the quality of the other players that you have at these positions. Just because you draft a guy in the second round doesn't mean he's going to be better than what you have right away. Right. So it's just going to take some time. I always think that drafting tackles is the way to go. I'm not as for drafting guards because here's my thinking there. You can't pay everybody. And I know I'm going to have to pay some tackles. I think I can fill in at guard. I'm not going to use a lot of capital on guards per se. And I'm not, hey, I know John Hanna was a guard and he's a Hall of Famer. I get it. But for the most part, guards are guards and they don't control the game as much as tackles do. So I'm going to spend money and draft capital on tackles, and I'm going to fill in at guard. And again, that's no reflection on Banks or anything else. That's just a philosophy of mine. So I think everybody has a little bit of different opinion on how they build an offensive lineman. To that end, I would pay and sign a veteran center. I think a veteran, smart center who's seen all the schemes, who can help the quarterback make calls, who can do all the things from a intelligence standpoint and communicative standpoint is worth paying money for. The Chargers went and got Ryan Lindsley from the Packers, and I think it's been a great addition. Very few people are talking about it, but that is a great addition that I love to see because he's made Justin Herbert's life easy. He's made it a lot better. He helps him make the calls, protections, all that stuff. So that's just kind of the way I feel about building an offensive line. Everybody fits their guys in at some point. You draft a guy that high, he's going to play. So maybe it's next year that Banks plays. I don't know. But I do know it's about fit to start with. Right.
I agree with you 100%. And it goes back to coaching because let's face it, there's some college coaches who aren't very good. I know a few college coaches and the techniques that they teach sometimes is kind of like different from what is.
It's a different game though. It's a different game.
It's a different game. It's a different game.
Yeah.
So like when you talk about leverage and you talk about how offensive linemen should leverage how they work, how they should be cross-faced or not be cross-faced, it's a learning curve that
bigger than ever.
Not as seamless as one would expect. But when you talk about power-based runs, that's just mono more times than not. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're right, but how many times do you see that in college? Very seldom.
Not very many.
Everything's spread. Everything's recess offense. So there are a lot of offensive linemen now that don't even get in the stance.
That's very true.
You can't even tell if they can bend. Their job is just to stay in front of somebody, screen them, dance with them for just a few seconds, and either the running play's going by or the quarterback, the ball's out of his hands. So it's a complete different mindset. You've got to find now, if you're identifying college linemen, you've just got to find a simple one or two things like bend, like if he can extend and execute his lower half. And once he hits people, there's a fine line. If you can watch my hand here, there's a fine line between this and this, right? Of an offensive lineman.
Yep.
And that's really what you're looking for. The waist bending this way. Nope. The sucking of the hips that way.
Knee bending.
That's a fine line. And that's as good a lesson as any to, I think, lead you to some power in some offensive linemen. You've got to be able to engage your lower body. And so many offensive systems now don't even require their linemen to engage their lower body.
That's very true. Everything's spread for more times than not. That's why it's cool watching Alabama. I mean, I'm a huge Roll Tide fan, but I look at guys like Evan Neal. All right. Evan Neal can play the piano along the offensive line. He filled in for Jedrick Wills on the right side, now filling in for Alex Leatherwood on the left side. Before that, he was an interior guard. How good do you think Evan, I mean, you drafted Walter Jones, right? You had guys like Walter Jones. How good do you think Evan Neal can be?
Well, I know this. He's going to been coached well. He's going to have thick skin because he's going to be coached hard, and he's going to do it right. His fundamentals are going to be right. The only thing that would hold a guy back like that is athletically, if he has some kind of faulty system where he can't slide with range, but I haven't seen that either. I think you can't go wrong with Alabama defensive backs, offensive linemen, linebackers, just because I know the quality of coaching that they're going to get. That's going to be the same system they're running in the NFL. So there's fewer leaps of faith that you have to make with those players. A lot has been made about the Leatherwood kid that the Raiders drafted last year, and a lot of the media takes have been negative on him. I actually think he's going to be fine. I think he may end up in moving to guard at some point, but he's fine. He's got bend. He's strong. He's athletic. It's an adjustment to play against the TJ Watts of the world. Trust me, it's different. Joey Bosa, all these guys are good, right? They're not. They didn't see this kind of speed in college, so it's an adjustment for all of them. But I think he'll be fine. Again, I'd have no problem drafting anybody from Alabama, regardless of position.
Yeah, dude. Alabama, Nick Saban coach teams are they're pro ready. I think he gets them ready for the pro game. He learned the way he prepares. I've been told it's just ridiculous. I never met Nick Saban, but I heard it's legit. And that's why he wins.
He's legit. I had an office next to him for 2 or 3 years in Miami, so I got to see it firsthand.
That's right.
And,
that's right.
I got to see it firsthand, and I know he's using the same scouting system, the same evaluative tools that we used in Miami at Alabama, and it's been fun to watch. That's for sure.
I know I learned a few things from watching college game film. I watch college too. When it comes to Alabama, it's interesting to grade their defensive backs in secondary because again, they have what's called rules of engagement. So literally you have to be I mean, usually it's just a cover shell, but with boundary cornerbacks and safeties and how you have the star position and how they can rotate and do flip alignment and things like that, you don't see that in college. You see that maybe at the pro NFL level, but they're teaching this in college, which is really crazy.
Right.
So I just have so much respect for Nick Saban and how he runs things, because I think his level of thinking is just tough. No, I don't know of a coach that does it any better. Do you?
No, not at all. He's the best defensive coach I've ever been with in my life. In
There you
fact,
go.
in Miami, he coached the DBs. He threw the ball drills to the corners in practice. I mean,
Wow.
that's his deal, right? He is a defensive back coach. All the details you just mentioned to the finest degree he teaches, and he reps it every day. Our guys had to be smart. They had to play difficult coverage. They had to, what if, then this. They had to think a lot. It's not just cat coverage. And he has a way of teaching the landmarks and getting places in zone that I've never been around that before. So he's impressive. Obviously, he's the real deal. And that's it. That stuff worked in the pros as well. So I'm always smiling when I hear about Nick's defensive backs, because I've seen that for real in live action.
Yeah, he's awesome. Let's move on to Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase. All right, during the preseason, everyone said this guy can't even catch a flu. Now he's been on a tear this year. What separates him from other rookies in this cream of the crop class? He has 27 catches, I believe, for 553 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, averages 20.5 yards per pop. What makes him so special? My pre-draft analysis was, I went on a limb here, but I really saw the next Reggie Wayne. What do you see from Jamar Chase now that we're heading into week 7?
Well, I think we're seeing, forget the skill set. I think we're seeing a comfort level now. I don't think he feels the pressure. He made it through the drops, of all, like you said, everybody was down on him for dropping this, dropping that. He showed he has thick skin, which it comes with the territory, especially as a young player in the NFL. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get covered. I think the biggest thing he's been able to do is he's been able to find a way to get off press. He's getting away from people and being available. I think he's always been pretty good at sitting in zones and finding soft spots. And I think him and Joe Burrow have a connection. I think that's a plus. They've played together. They know each other. Burrow knows when he can find him. And I think it's a good combination. It's going to be fun to watch over the years. Once the Bengals get their offensive line sorted out a little bit, we'll be able to get a better gauge on what kind of a system, they're going to have there, because Joe Burrow is the real deal. And I think if they can keep him healthy and upright, the Bengals have a chance to be pretty good in years to come.
The Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase connection dates back to their days at LSU. Yep. I think that's a huge win for their progress, because anytime a quarterback has a new wide receiver, you have to get the timing down. But they've been together for so long. I think they just picked up where they left off at LSU. And I think that has a lot to do with Jamar Chase's progression, because at the end of the day, it's almost like, I know what Joe Burrow can do. I know where the ball is going. I know when I run the speed out where it's going to go, if it's going to be, more toward the sideline or whatnot. So Jamar Chase is just, he's so fun to watch. Yeah. I'm not even a Bengals fan, and I don't like them, but I appreciate the NFL. I appreciate Jamar Chase and what he brings to the table, because he's just amazing to me. He's just so good. He's just so good.
He's done a good job. Their communication, it's evident. I'm sure Joe Burrow has had a lot to do with the development of Chase, just because he knows how to deal with him. He knows how to communicate with him. He makes sure that he knows what he's doing. A lot of times young guys, they can't develop until they know what they're doing. And I think Joe Burrow probably had a lot to do with Chase learning the system. Not that he's there yet, but it sure has sped up the learning curve for sure.
And they have a good trio of wide receivers. They have Tyler Boyd, who's one of the best slot receivers in the game. And they have T. Higgins. I mean, you can't coach that height, weight, speed on the outside. And then you team that with Jamar Chase. You have a strong nucleus there, along with Joe Mixon. So the skill players are already set. Sky's the limit for Bengals fans. I'm really happy to see them having some success. Let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers. People want to talk about this. Kyle Shanahan and Trey Lance. There's been criticism about how Kyle Shanahan has been using Trey Lance. What's your take on, one, how he's using him? Because I don't know. I think, honestly, in my honest opinion, I think Kyle Shanahan's using him just fine, but what do I know? And second, my second part of that question is, what is your take on Trey Lance up to this point?
I would say this. I think Shanahan is using Trey Lance the only way he knows that he can be successful. And I think that is in certain packages for certain plays. I
Mhm.
don't think the kid is ready to run an offense. I think there's a big difference, like I mentioned earlier, with running plays and running an offense. And I don't think Trey Lance is ready for that. Of all the quarterbacks that came out last year, he was the one guy that I couldn't have done what Kyle and John Lynch did. I couldn't have made that move based on what I saw on tape. There was too big of a leap of faith for me. Now, they made the leap. Good for them. I understand it. But I had not seen enough of Trey Lance to say, wow, this guy can be this. They're better than me. Trust me. They got bigger, more guts than I did to make that move. That doesn't mean that Trey Lance doesn't have potential. I think he does. I just think he had further to come. And you're seeing that. Trey Lance is not ready to play right now. He doesn't want to throw the football. He wants to run as much as he can. He wants to get out of the pocket as soon as he can. And he wants to throw a fastball every chance he can. That's not playing quarterback in the NFL, so it's not real. But I think Kyle knows that. And I thought Kyle's comments have been not surprising to me in that he wants Jimmy G back, right? He can't wait to get him back because he knows that's their best chance to win. So he chose to replace Jimmy G with Trey Lance, but at the same time, not yet. Just a year from now. So he's made sure that Jimmy G is in the loop and his quarterback for this year, and he wants him to be that guy. And I think that gives him the best chance. And I agree with what he's doing. I don't think Trey Lance is ready for anything more than he's given him right now.
Yeah, Turan Lewis, thank you so much for the super chat and super sticker. He says, with John Lynch saying that Jimmy G has elevated his level of play and Kyle continued to start him, it has me thinking Jed York is involved. My question to you is, what, from a GM perspective, I mean, you play GM every single day. I mean, I believe you still think like you're a GM because you are a GM. Let's face it. I want to know why you felt like Trey Lance wasn't worthy of the number 3 overall pick.
Well, I just didn't see enough on tape to say this guy's going to be a starting NFL quarterback. I saw a few flashes of skills, but this guy played one football game last year. I just couldn't fathom drafting a guy with the 3rd pick, not even to mention what you had to give up to get up there to get him, and he played one game and he never really played against top competition the year before either. So it's just too many dots to connect. I didn't, and it might be a fault of mine, but I couldn't connect all those dots to get to where they got to make the deal. That's all. And again, I see some of the things they're talking about in flashes. There just wasn't a body of work I was willing to bite the bullet on and go way up there to get.
Consistency is key in the NFL. And if you're not consistent enough in the FCS level, what makes you think you're going to be consistent enough at the FBS and then the NFL level? There's too many layers, like you said, to kind of project how this player is going to perform. And again, we're not saying that this guy's not going to be special 2-3 years from now. We're just saying to give up that much draft capital for selecting a guy at 3, there has to be some type of a learning curve and adjustment period. And you're talking 2, 3, even 4 years from now.
The best description I heard, Ryan, was from another GM who I respect. He said, Trey Lance is a year away from being a year away. He's a year away from being a year away. So that's at least 2 more years. That's correct. And I couldn't disagree with that. I don't think he's ready. And I don't think he'll be ready next year. But you're going to see him before then. And I guess there'll be more on-the-job training. So we'll see.
It's going to really put John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan kind of on the hot seat. I mean, I think if they have one more losing season, they only have one winning season in 5 years. And then they go into next year and they have another losing season and Trey Lance somehow struggles when he's supposed to be the golden child, the franchise quarterback. Right. Then you're going to hear whispers of them being on the hot seat because they only had one winning season. But again, that's life of the NFL, and I know NFL stands for not for long. If you're not, it's what have you done for me lately? And if you're not getting it done now, sorry, but not sorry. That's just the way it goes. It was a ballsy move. It was a ballsy move. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. I want to know your thoughts on my man, Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. He is in a contract year. In my grading system, I grade all the top safety, strong safety, free safety, doesn't matter. He's my top graded in my BWF grading system, top ranked safety in the NFL. He is now in line for a new contract at the end of the year. He's only 29 years old. I'm 38, so I say only 29, but in football age, that's pretty old, approaching 30. From a GM perspective, if you're Brett Veach, do you give him that extension and have him help reset that market with Minka Fitzpatrick there. You know, you're being vying for their services. But tell us what you would do with Tyrann Mathieu if he was on your roster right now.
It's a really tough fit. I would like to have Honey Badger on my team without a doubt, no doubt.
Okay.
I mean, I've said that from day one. He's turned his whole life around. Now he's a positive. You know, this kid came from not a good place when he came out of LSU. So he's definitely changed his whole life around. Now he's a guy that you want on your team. He's a leader. He's dependable. But here's the rub. He's a safety, and he's a little bit of a different kind of safety. He's a playmaking safety like the kid in Seattle, Adams, thinks he is. But Seattle paid him $17 million, and my guess is they wish they hadn't. And that's the problem. And he's a lot younger than Honey Badger is. Right. So you're talking about a position that is hard to dominate a game. It's a position hard to control a game at safety. I just think I don't know that the contract is going to be easy to work out at all. I think it's going to be a struggle. I think the Chiefs probably have a number they're willing to pay, and beyond that, he might have to go somewhere else. But I'm not sure anybody else is going to pay it either at age 29, and with his background being what it was. So I think they, maybe through a process of elimination, they end up coming back to the table to each other. But it's hard to put a number. I think he's probably worth more to the Chiefs than he is to anybody else because they know him better than anybody else. What that number is, I don't know. I mean, we know Adams got 17 million, which is kind of a crazy amount in retrospect. But if you're talking about 10 or 12 million a year, maybe you make a case and sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal. But I couldn't see paying a safety, $15 million who's in his 30s. That doesn't make sense. So the business side of it doesn't line up with the football side. That's the hard part of making this decision.
Yeah, and it's one of the hardest decisions to make because, like I said, he's the best safety in my grading system for the second year in a row now. And I think he adds a different dimension because, again, he can be a strong safety, he can be a free safety. We talk about Jamal Adams, how he's a traditional box safety. But I think Tyrann Mathieu brings another dimension. But like you said, it's hard for safeties to have a game-changing impact like an edge rusher like TJ Watt, who really transformed the game as an on-the-ball linebacker, right? I mean, because usually if you're a safety, you're kind of playing your respective zones, keeping everything in front of you. And you can come up and hit some guys at the line of scrimmage and mirror the tight end, whatever the case may be, take the running back out of the flat. But more times than not, you're right. But okay, I'm gonna make another point. If it was Troy Polamalu or Ed Reed, would you give that safety big time money?
I would give Ed Reed big time money for sure, because he plays with range. He plays with feel and instincts that as a last line of defense defender, I think that's valuable. Troy played a whole different game. Troy played a lot like Adams does, more in the box, more off the cuff. They need a free safety behind them to kind of clean up the mess, so to speak. Let me ask you this with Matthews, and I don't know the answer to this. I haven't studied him that close this year. Does he show the range where he can be in the back end and get from hash to hash and all that?
So the thing about it was he does get there and he does make plays. However, there are a few plays he leaves on the field where the quarterback doesn't find the receiver and he's out of position. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, I got you.
So fairness, yes, when the ball's being thrown in that direction, he's there. But there are other plays when it's not thrown in the direction, he is not there. So to play a little bit of devil's advocate, I would say he doesn't have the range that he used to have when he was with the Arizona Cardinals. You got me on that one, but I got you covered. I know I got you.
I hear you.
Yeah, but I just love Tyrann Mathieu. I'm just a huge fan. And he's small. He's small like me, short. He's like, what, 5'10"? No, he's 5'9". I think he's 5'9",
He's a football player. There's no doubt about it. He's just a football player.
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk to you about the AFC and NFC. I want your Super Bowl picks. I want to talk about who you think is going to represent the AFC and the NFC. I know, barring injuries, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Dak Prescott. Obviously, he got injured on the last play. But who are your picks up to this point? And we're going to assess this probably about week 12. We'll do it again. But right now.
Well, I mean, I would say in the AFC, and this is going to feel like a contrarian opinion because they just lost, but I think Buffalo is the best team in the AFC.
That's what I picked. Yeah.
Buffalo goes to Tennessee. They lose the game, but after the game, I asked myself, is Is Tennessee better than Buffalo? No, not to my
No.
mind. Not. I mean, if Josh Allen doesn't slip on the quarterback sneak, Buffalo's going to win the game. So I think Buffalo is the best in the AFC.
Yeah.
I think in the NFC, and again, it pains me sometimes to say this, but I think Dallas has come so far that I believe in Dak Prescott so much that I would pick him over a lot of other quarterbacks who you would probably shake your head at that I would rather have Dak. But that's how much I think he's upped his game. Dak Prescott is different than he's been. Everybody says, oh, yeah, he was this before he got hurt. No, he wasn't. He's better this year than I've ever seen him. And I just trust the guy. That's not analytics. That's not, high level intelligence. I just trust the guy. I like him. I like he understands leadership. He understands character. I would want him to run my team. So I think the Cowboys and the Bills would make a great retro Super Bowl, so to speak. And if I was today, as we sit here after 6 games, those are the 2 best teams for my money.
I don't know if you can predict the future of what my picks were. That was my pick.
Well, no, I'm not Karnak. I can't. No,
I'm not joking. I can show you my notes. My picks were the Bills. I should have went first. My picks were the Bills and the Cowboys. And I'll tell you why. Because again, in my grading system, right? And I grade all teams. You look at the Buffalo Bills, Tre'Davious White, lockdown corner, right? Mm-hmm. Not too many people talk about him, but then you have Jordan Poyer in the back end. You have Tremaine Edmonds. You have Milano there. You have a lot of players who are just getting it done. Gregory Rousseau, Carlos Basham, Boogie Basham, who they got in the draft. I mean, they really solidified that pass rush. And that's one thing that my boy talked about, AJ Highsmith, who was a Bill scout and said, hey, you know what, Ryan, we had to address the pass rush. That's something that we had to do when we were talking on the BDW show. And it just translates. You see what they were trying to do. And their defense is just stout. I mean, you win. I'm still a firm believer in defense wins championships. And again, you roll on the other side of the field, you look at Dallas Cowboys, right? You look at Trayvon Diggs. I mean, the guy is just making interception after interception after interception. In my grading system, all right, I like talking about my grading system. I do the legwork on that. Week 2, he gave up 180 passing yards in my grading system and then bounced back week 3, 4, and 5. I haven't graded week 6 yet, but every week he's been progressively getting better. And one thing I like about Trayvon Diggs, and I covered him at Alabama when I was covering for Hot Mike, and I would cover Alabama games, is you saw that he was always in position. However, he wasn't always coming down with the interceptions. Right. And now you're seeing him making plays on the football. He's always been around the football. But for me, in my notes here, it was, he's always around the football, but can't make the interception. He's always in position, and now you're seeing it translate. So it's really cool to see Trayvon Diggs, but one guy who I think is the missing link to the Dallas Cowboys is my pre-draft defensive rookie of the year, Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons to me is not your traditional linebacker. Yes, he plays on the strong side, but he can rush the passer from a 4-3 defensive end position, being that Leo position defensive end. He played that in high school. He can also cover on the back end because he has blazing 4.3 speed, and he can blitz like a freaking outside edge rusher. Right. So to me, I think the Dallas Cowboys, like to your point, and you talk about Dak Prescott, right? You said there's, people might be laughing about you. I'm not laughing because I think Dak Prescott, I think he's a top 5 quarterback.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I would even, I know it sounds crazy. I would even possibly put him in the top 3. Mm-hmm. That's how good I think Dak Prescott. Now people are like, oh my gosh, you don't know what you're talking about. Is it crazy for me to think that he's a top 3 quarterback?
No, not in my mind. I told you I would pick him over a bunch of people and get laughed out of the bar. The guys would say that the drunks at the bar would kick me out. That's how bad it is. But I just go on what I see and how I feel. And I definitely agree with that. Yeah. To that end, there's 2 teams right now that are in top 10 in offense and defense both. It's Buffalo and it's Arizona. Those are the 2 teams that are in both offensive top 10 categories and defensive. But my feeling about Arizona is the second half has been a struggle for them. The second half of the season, making adjustments, staying healthy, all the above. And I think Dallas just has to be average on defense. I agree with you. Parsons is great. But the resurgence that I've seen from Randy Gregory, Leighton Vander Esch, those guys are now playing like they did a couple years ago and playing at top level. So I think Dan Quinn has done an awesome job. He's got them back to even keel, at least on defense. And that's probably going to be good enough because they're creating turnovers and making big plays. So they can laugh us out, Ryan. I don't care. I'm picking the same guys you are, Buffalo and the Cowboys.
Yeah. It reminds me of the 1993 Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't the Super Bowl back in 1993 at Pasadena where Michael Jackson did the halftime show? The only reason I remember that
that's why I said retro.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Everything comes full circle, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I'm just going with my gut feeling through week 7, obviously barring any injuries. One thing that people don't talk about, we talked about it earlier, is you talk about the rushing attack. I think you still need to be able to run the football in late November, early December, and then also stop the run. And when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they have Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, if you look across the league, how many teams would even have one of those guys on that quality of level? I mean, you can look at the Cleveland Browns, but Kareem Hunt's hurt, and so it has been Nick Chubb. But there's not too many teams out there. And when you talk about the Baltimore Ravens, I can't, I mean, as good as Greg Roman is, I think at some point they're going to get figured out. I think Lamar Jackson can only do so much. Right. And when you run into a team like the Buffalo Bills who have speed on all 3 levels, that's going to be the wild card for me. I think the defense is going to hold up. And I think that's where, like you said, I think that's where the Bills are going to come out on top. But yeah, it's funny how we come with the same answers. I should have went first because then people are like, okay, sure. Did you really pick them? Yes, I picked them.
You're preaching to the choir, Ryan. You're preaching to the choir. We see it the same way. I apologize. It's not good for TV or podcast, but it got us there anyway.
It was. Here's my choice. Before hopping on the show, it was Cowboys, Bills, and then I said definitely. I said the AFC Championship probably going to come down to the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. One, because I think Greg Roman knowing Greg Roman personally, he's very good at scheming things up in the run game. Passing game, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to, it's kind of like, but running game, he's very smart at doing that and exposing defensive weaknesses. So I think that's why I picked the Baltimore Ravens to get to the AFC Championship game. And then the NFC, you cannot count Tom Brady. So I think in the NFC, it's going to be Tom Brady versus, I'm drawing a blank here. I said Bills and,
Dallas
Bills and Cowboys,
Tampa,
and Dak Prescott.
A rematch of the opener is what
there
you say. Tampa and Dallas, yeah.
See, there you go. That's why I said full circle, right? So like you get it. And so I don't know. I just think the way the teams are going, the way the NFL is trending, the way we look at all 32 NFL teams, I just think that's the way it's going to go. But barring any injuries, hopefully Dak is okay.
Here, that's the key, and I don't think you can really say that with a straight face because we're going to have injuries. It's a long grind, and Tampa is going through theirs right now. We may be sitting here 6 weeks from now with a total different face on what we're talking about, just because injuries. And I've always said this for years, Ryan, the second half of NFL seasons are all about the coaches. It's about injuries and about coaches making adjustments. There's plenty of film. We've played our division opponents one time. There's so much more now we can game plan with and for rather than these first 5 or 6 games. So it's all about adjustments and making the right adjustments. And some coaches are better at it than others. So time will tell, but I'm always anxious to see the second half, how teams play teams for the second time, especially interdivision rivals and things like that. So we got a long ways to go. I know that 17 games this week, this year is totally different as well. So a lot of fun frontier to explore.
All right. Well, Randy, I had a lot of time. I had a lot of fun, and we spent a lot of time together on this podcast. I know you have to get going, but Randy, always a pleasure talking to you. And great minds think alike. It's crazy. I hope we get something different next time. Maybe I'll go first, and then you can go second on the Super Bowl pick. But Randy, thank you so much, my man, and mahalo for the love and support. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Ryan. I enjoyed it as always.
All right, take it easy. All right, that was Randy Mueller, guys. And you guys can follow him at MuellerFootball.com. He's also on Twitter. I'm going to put the link up to his Twitter account up in the bio. So good things to come from him. This was a good show. I like talking about all NFL teams, as you guys know. I'm going to just go ahead and talk about my picks here. All right. So people are wanting to know about my grading system, right? What's your BWF grading system? What's going to happen? What's going on with your grading system? I have released that. I was going to release it on Twitter, but you know what? Since we're on this show right now, I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. My number 1 interior defensive lineman is not Aaron Donald, believe it or not. It's not Aaron Donald. And I'm not saying he's not the best interior defensive lineman. He is. But in my grading system up to this point, up to week 5, I haven't graded week 6. Coach's film just came out yesterday. But up to week 5, my number 1 interior defensive lineman is Washington football team Jonathan Allen, who was in my tier 2 last year as in riser. Go check my Twitter receipts. I said he's a guy to watch, and he is shining out of control. He got that big money contract this year, grading out right now at an 8.3 out of a 10. So Jonathan Allen is balling out of control. He's in line to get my PFWA first team all pro selection. For those who don't know what's PFWA, it's Pro Football Writers Association. I have year-end voting rights. You guys know that. If you guys don't know that, he is in line to get my vote for one of the defensive tackle positions. And then the line, you guys want to know where Aaron Donald stands, right? So Aaron Donald clocks in at 7.5 out of a 10, which is second. So he's just right there. And then Cam Hayward, who is my number 2 ranked interior defensive lineman last year, comes in at 7.0. And then Deforest Buckner, you guys want to know who Deforest Buckner, where he ranks in my top 5? Well, he comes in at number 4 at 6.3. So you have him there. Then last but not least, you have Chris Jones graded at 6.6. So Buckner rounds out the top 5. Chris Jones comes in at 4. And you get the picture there. Now let's move on to the edge rushers. All right. The edge rushers through the first 6 weeks, or the first 5 weeks have gone basically according to plan. But my top edge rusher so far is Khalil Mack. The Chicago Bears Khalil Mack graded at a 9.4 out of a 10. 9.4 out of a 10. 7.3 is all pro level. He's graded at a 9.4 out of a 10. Near perfect score through the first 5 games of the year. Excellent play from Khalil Mack. Next up, you have who is next on my list. You will have, let's see here, 9.4. And then you have Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons, who we just talked about with my man Randy Mueller, comes in at 8.1. He's not considered an edge, but he is an outside linebacker in the 4-3 defensive end system, and he does rush the passer. So I kind of put him in that edge category because he does rush the passer a lot of the times. So he is graded at an 8.1, playing at an all-pro level in my grading system. And then you go with my second guy. Well, there's a lot of guys in here, but 7.4 is Danielle Hunter out of the Minnesota Vikings. And 7.3 is Myles Garrett, tied with Cameron Jordan out of the New Orleans Saints, coming out at 7.3 as well. And people want to know where Joey Bosa goes. Joey Bosa is average this year. I know that sounds crazy, but he gives us so much run fit integrity for my liking, graded at a 5.6 out of a 10. So again, you guys want to know where Joey Bosa goes, and then now you're going, where is Nick Bosa? Where's Nick Bosa ranked? Is he better than Joey Bosa? Like, where do you have Nick Bosa ranked? Well, he comes in at a 6.9 at a Pro Bowl level in my grading system, so that's way better than his brother, 5.6, all right? So again, a lot of grades coming through, and I don't know how Chandler Jones was ranked 72.8 by PFF, or sorry, 73.4. He was graded 73.4 out of PFF through the first 5 weeks of the year. In my grading system, he was graded at a 2.3. He only had one good game, all right? And that was the first game of the year, and then he kind of tailored off thereafter. So sorry, Chandler Jones, after that 5-sack performance, but you haven't been getting it done in my grading system. You're not playing at an average level, bro. Just saying. Then you don't want to talk about the off-ball linebackers. People want to talk about Fred Warner. I'm going to give it to you. You guys want to know my grading system? You guys got my grading system, all right? So this is it. You guys want to know if I run all the grades? I do run all the grades. That's why I've been off the grid freaking dissecting game film 65, 70 plus hours a week. Not joking. After this live stream, I'm going to hit the gym. And as I'm hitting the gym doing cardio, I'm on my Game Pass watching coaches film, doing live streams, grading players. All right. So when it comes to the off-ball linebacker, which includes Darius Leonard, Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, Bobby Wagner, Devin White, you get the picture. The top 5 names we often hear about. Darius Leonard, for the second year in a row, through week 5, has been graded as my top off-ball linebacker. Now, he's not my PFWA selection last year. That goes to Fred Warner, because I think Fred Warner does a lot more. But Darius Leonard this year has been ultra consistent. In fact, I would consider him to be and compare him to, if you want to talk about NBA terms, right? NBA comparables, I would call him the big fundamental, kind of like the Tim Duncan of the NFL, because he's so fundamentally sound, Darius Leonard is. And he doesn't make the splash plays or the crazy plays, but at the end of the day, he's ultra consistent and ultra competitive, and I really like his demeanor on and off the football field. Darius Leonard, again, is reset the market for off-ball linebackers for a reason. He's graded at an 8.0 out of a 10 in my grading system, which tops all off-ball linebackers. Second comes in Fred Warner, who ironically got the second richest contract for all off-ball linebackers, coming in at 7.3 out of a 10. For those who are saying that Fred Warner tailored off after his contract signing, please save yourself, man. Fred Warner is doing absolutely amazing. He's playing at an all-pro level in my grading system. BEASTwriter approved. You want to challenge me on this? I have film to prove it. Challenge me. Roquan Smith, my best off-ball linebacker last year in my grading system in terms of pass coverage ability, comes at a 6.9. So he's the third-ranked off-ball linebacker, was a second-team All-Pro last year. And this year, he again is playing at a Pro Bowl level. I'm not sure he's going to be an All-Pro, but if he continues this trend, he's definitely going to get paid and get paid handsomely, because remember, he was the guy who I wanted the 49ers to select and trade up for instead of getting right tackle Mike McGlinchey. And I used the draft day reference and right from my media workroom inside Levi Stadium. And I took a picture. I said, draft Roquan Smith no matter what, hashtag draft day. And here we are. How many years later? 4 years later, 5 years later, and he's balling out of control. All right. So he's going to be due for a big money contract when it's all said and done, as a 2018 first round pick, drafted number 8 overall by the Chicago Bears. So again, you have two guys on the Chicago Bears defense who are playing at all pro or Pro Bowl level in Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack. All right. You guys want to know what Bobby Wagner is doing up to this point? I don't know how PFF grades him at 66.6. PFF grades him second-ranked off-ball linebacker, and then I don't know how that's even possible, because in my grading system, he's graded at a 4.0 out of a 10, which is not even average. He gives up way too much as a curl hook defender for my liking, so sorry, Bobby Wagner, you're not even in the running, bro, as a top off-ball linebacker anymore. You haven't been for the better half of the last 2 years, or now going on 3 years. Just don't have it anymore. You're one of the best run defenders in the NFL, I'll give you that. But in pass coverage, that's where you kind of tailor off. Then you have Bucks Devin White. Look at my grading set. I'm literally talking about other teams. Okay. Bucks Devin White comes in at 5.8 out of a 10. 5.8 out of a 10. And PFF grades him at a 38.2 through 5 weeks of the year. How is that even possible? I don't know. But again, I'm not saying PFF is wrong. I'm just saying I have my own grading system, bro. And it is what it is. In my grading system, he graded at 5.8 out of a 10, which is kind of above average, not nearly at a Pro Bowl level. But again, PFF has him graded way worse at a 38.2. All right. So interesting to point that out. Now let's talk about the boundary cornerbacks. All right. The boundary cornerbacks, Jalen Ramsey comes in at 6.1. All right. But my number one, as we talked about Randy Mueller, my number one cornerback this year has been Buffalo Bills Tre'Davious White. Again, he can be comparable to the big fundamental Tim Duncan when you talk about NBA players and comps to NFL players, so forth. Tre'Davious White graded out at an 8.8 through 4 weeks. I still have to grade week 5, but through 4 weeks, 8.8. And he's playing at a Pro Bowl level. I don't know how, all pro level, I should say. I don't know how PFF grades him at a 58.9. That's just mind-boggling to me. 58.9 means average. In my system, he's the top-rated cornerback overall. It blows my mind, because last year we can have that Honey Badger talk where Honey Badger liked my tweet when PFF graded him like one of the worst safeties through week 14. And he was my top ranked safety in the NFL during that time. And he ended up being a first team All Pro selection by PFWA and AP All Pro team. Anyways, that's why I have my own grading system. All right. So not saying PFF is wrong, not saying PFF is right. I'm just saying my grading system is my grading system. And it just adds another source of information. Of course, who knows who's right and who's wrong. All right. I just love running these grades because it's just funny. All right. We talk about Trayvon Diggs. Trayvon Diggs has been balling out of control. We talked about him in my grading system a little bit earlier, Randy Mueller. JC Jackson, obviously balling out of control as my number 2 ranked cornerback this year, graded out at 7.5 through 4 weeks. Still have to do week 5 and week 6, but he's playing at an all pro level. Last year, he was ranked as my 3rd best cornerback in my grading system, right behind Jair Alexander and, of course, Jalen Ramsey. So a lot of good things coming out of the whole entire NFL as I continue to strive for the pulse of each and every NFL team as it pertains to my BWF grading system. And you guys want to know who's doing well, who's not doing so hot. I got you covered. All right. Talk about the safeties. I just said Tyrann Mathieu, Honey Badger is my number 1 safety in my grading system. Buda Baker clocks in with the Arizona Cardinals at 7.7, which is number 2 overall. And then after that, you have Jimmy Ward at 7.5 through 5 weeks of the season. So Jimmy Ward, don't sleep on Jimmy Ward. He's always consistent, always in position, and always ready to make a play on the football. So I really like Jimmy Ward. Obviously, Jesse Bates III, still have to run certain grades on him through week 5 through week 6, but he's graded out of 7.8, which is an all-pro level. 7.3 is the cutoff for all-pro. He's graded out of 7.8, so he's playing far beyond all-pro level in my grading system. Justin Simmons, he's graded out of 6.5, which is a Pro Bowl level, but he's nowhere near the play of Jesse Bates, Jimmy Ward, Tyrann Mathieu, Budda Baker, guys like that. All right. Now the wild card for me is Derwin James. Derwin James is a guy who didn't even play last year, and he actually came back or if he did play, he didn't play much if he did play. But he basically was out last year and then came back this year, and he's balling out of control. In my grading system, he is graded at a 7.3 out of a 10. So that's an all-pro level. So PFF grades him at a 64.3, which would be 64 out of 100. In my grading system, he's graded at 7.3, which is an all-pro level, which is 73 out of 100. So you're looking at a differential in points of 9-point differential when you talk about a 100-point scale. So not too bad there. We talk about Budda Baker. My grades come out at 7.7, which is 77 out of 100, and PFF grades him at a 73 out of 100. So those are only a 4-point margin there. The biggest margin, the difference when it comes to the strong safety position happens to be Tyrann Mathieu, who's graded 82 out of 100 or 8.2 based on my grading system, as opposed to PFF, which grades him at a 62.6. I don't know why, but they don't like Honey Badger. But I love Honey Badger. So, yeah. Anyways, that's my grading system on the defense side of the football. You guys are probably wondering what the heck is going on. David Rodriguez asked me if you guys have questions or you guys want to know any type of information in regards to your favorite football team, consider sending me super chat and super stickers. That's how we stay on topic. But I'll go ahead and answer this question because your boy has to hit the gym. That's why I was drinking this. It's my pre-workout, and I have to multitask because that's what we do here in the BWF, right? All right. David Rodriguez says, do you think Lynch gets fired after this year? If we can get a new GM, do you think he makes all the final decisions? I don't think Lynch gets fired after this year because, again, you have to see how Trey Lance progresses, and I think they're going to ride that wave. So I think John Lynch's job is safe, at least for this year. So I'm just going to downplay that and shoot that down for now. But that's a great question that you have there. But as of right now, I think it's unfair without the season coming to fruition yet, and there's a lot of missing parts. Who knows? Trey Lance can be the next best thing. It's funny, if you guys watch Inside the NFL, this is non-sponsored, obviously, but on Paramount Plus, which I do, you talk about a comparison. There's Phil Simms of CBS and NFL Showtime on Paramount Plus made a Joe Montana comparison to a current quarterback, and his name is not Tom Brady. His name is quarterback Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, who we talked about with Randy Mueller earlier. And the Jamar Chase Burrow connection is alive and it's kicking, and I like it. And I'm really happy for Bengals fans. Why am I bringing this up? Because at the end of the day, it's almost like this. Phil Simms played quarterback, and he was a pretty good quarterback in my estimation, playing for the New York Giants under Bill Parcells, played with Lawrence Taylor, guys like that. And he knows the quarterback position. He's very smart, very bright. So if you don't follow Phil Simms, go ahead and do that. Follow NFL Showtime too. NFL in Showtime. It used to be on, it's not NFL Showtime. It's called Inside the NFL. It used to be on Showtime. Excuse me. It's on Paramount Plus now. But I still got to get that out of my head. But I strongly consider you guys to go watch Paramount Plus and watch Inside the NFL. I don't know what to tell you. Joe Montana, Joe Burrow comparison. I'm not sure if I would go that far. I mean, comparing Joe Montana to anyone would kind of be, I bet you Joe Montana's like, that's a slap in my face. No, I don't know. I don't know what Joe Montana would be thinking, but Joe Montana, okay, I don't know. That's some lofty comparisons there. I don't know. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very, very interesting. All right, that'll be it for this podcast on the BWF Family Show. I hope you guys liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. A lot of things to discuss, a lot of things to talk about. Like I said, I've been off the grid. You guys are probably wondering. You guys have been hitting me up on DMs and on social media. Where have you been? I missed you. What's going on? Hey, I've been watching film. That's what I do throughout the year. And I need to be mindful of keeping you guys in the loop on what's going on. But again, when you're grading 16 games, literally every single snap of 16 games, that's a lot of legwork to be doing. And so that's why every morning I wake up, I grind. Every morning I wake up, I watch coaches film. Because how are you going to analyze and critique a player and go on a show with like Randy Mueller and talk about a player if you're not watching coaches film and not knowing what to look for? I think it's funny when people watch coaches film and then try to break down the play, but then they don't even know what to look for. This, oh, that's a great play. Oh yeah, he should have been over there. And that was his zone coverage. And it's like, after talking to the coaches, they're like, was that really the zone? No, it wasn't. Like, okay. That's why you got cross-check your references. If there's fuga involved, which means fuck up the gray area. Sorry, not sorry, I'm cussing, but that's what I call it. It's called fuga. So that's all for that. All right, well, that'll be it for this show. Like I said, I had a lot of fun talking about my BWF grading system, talking about football and the pulse around the NFL with my man Randy Mueller, the great GM of the New Orleans Saints back in 2000, GM of the year. He really knows his stuff. Great minds think alike. I think it's really crazy how we come up with the same Super Bowl pick. I'm going to go first next time. That's all I got to say. But hey, that's a good thing, man. I mean, when you have people that think alike, it means we're on to something. And again, when you look at the Buffalo Bills and what they're trying to do with that defensive front seven, they're top 5, I believe, in scoring defense. I think that's the most important stat line that you look for. A lot of times people look for yards allowed. I don't do that. I grade off points on the scoreboard. Do you light up the scoreboard, or do you keep other teams from lighting up the scoreboard? That's the most important stat, because at the end of the game, the score matters. I don't care how many. You can give up 2,000 yards in the football game, but if you allow only 3 points in that game, I'll roll with that any day of the week. And that's where I think people and fans get the misconception when they look up stats and don't be a box score reader and just say, oh, well, they're ranked fifth overall. And it's like, okay, let's look at the teams that they're facing. Let's look at the way the game was being played, the time of possession, how many turnovers. That also affects the outcome of the game, because the time of possession has an outcome of that game. Whether any turnovers, forced fumbles, interceptions, was it a close score game, or was it a big lead? You got to look at all into that. Anyways, that's that. And I hope you guys had a lot of fun. One thing I like about the BWF is I like to make it very educational for you guys, so you guys actually know what to look for. I mean, anytime I want to learn this, use this, whether it be YouTube, Twitch, whatever the case may be, as like a social media learning tool. So if you can learn something from our BEASTwriter family show, then I'm going to go ahead and give it to you and share the information that I have, so you guys can have a broader knowledge of not just talking about guys like, let's say, Elijah Mitchell, right, who is on CBS right now, or talk about Chuba Hubbard from the Carolina Panthers. We want to talk about the whole landscape of the NFL and how that affects your team. I mean, you can be a fan of your favorite team, but again, how are you going to criticize or praise a player if you don't know the dynamics of the other 31? It makes no sense. So that's why I do the legwork. Is it time consuming? Absolutely. I mean, because no one wants to do that. Only scouts do that. Only GMs do that. The regular analyst, insider, beat writer does not do that. They just cover their one team, and that's basically it, which is fine. Which is great, actually, because that's your job. Your job is to cover one team. Why would you want to cover? That's just crazy. But again, that's just another way of how I think, of how I like doing things, is I like to cover as many teams as possible every single week, so I can gather. I like gather information, right? The more intel you have, the better analysis you can provide. And so that's what I try to do here. And again, Game Pass, if you guys haven't heard by now, Game Pass has been crap. Hate to say it, but the coach's film has been horrible. If you have NFL Game Pass and watch coach's film, it's ridiculous. Arun Singh, thank you so much for the super chat and super sticker. He says, watching your show has made me a smarter fan. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love. Check out my man, Big Boss Man Pizza here in the South Bay. Arun Singh, he owns Big Boss Man's Pizza. You can help it. That place is legit. It's Indian pizza, and you can't beat it. If you haven't had Indian pizza, it's legit. But yeah, this is something that I always wanted to talk about is, again, going back to talking about the Niners, for instance, right? I have grades on the Niners. If you guys want them, I can post them up on my BEASTwriter Plus newsletter, or I can talk about it here. But, I mean, the Niners, their defense is ranked, what, top five? Top five based on passing yards and rushing yards allowed. And their defense has been playing lights out. The defense is playing extremely well. So ultimately, it's going to come down to the offense, ironically, which is really ironic because Kyle Shanahan is one of the best offensive minds, if not the best NFL offensive mind in the NFL. I would put him up there with Andy Reid, put him up there with, again, Sean McVay, put him up there with, the likes of those types of guys. But the offense has to get going, man. The offense has to get going. And it's going to be interesting because the Niners are still a playoff contending team. I still firmly believe that. That's not just me being faithful. Although I want them to do well and I want to see them well, their offense just has to start clicking. Their offense just has to start clicking. And for me to say that their offense is going to be on the go, I don't know, because the offensive line is kind of The offensive line is not as good as it once was. So hopefully that bye week helped them out. But again, when you're playing in the NFC West, or I like to call the NFC Best, and you have teams like the Arizona Cardinals who are 6-0. And I'm just going to put it out there. I don't think the Arizona Cardinals, I agree with Randy Miller. I think they're going to taper off in the second half of the season. I think teams are going to catch up. Again, when you have to play I was going to say St. Louis Rams. My gosh. When you have to play the LA Rams and you have to play teams like the San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks, those are not easy wins. And you have to play those teams twice a year within the division. And then going outside the division where teams that you only plays once a year to prep for, when you have more body of games to pull from within the division, as opposed to that, it's going to make it's a lot harder. And I know they got JJ Watt and Chandler Jones, like I said, not even great average in my grading system, but you got JJ Watt, you have Isaiah Simmons, you have Budda Baker, first team all pro level in my grading system. But they can be exposed. I think they can be exposed, but it's going to take a collective effort because at the end of the day, that defense is playing lights out. I mean, I don't know, but I think they're going to taper off as the second half of the season rolls on. They don't have Hassan Reddick anymore. If I'm not mistaken, he's with the Carolina Panthers now. So there's that. And remember, Chandler Jones requested a trade. Just saying. All right. Well, that's it. That's literally it, guys, because I got to get going. It's 4:25. I got to hit the gym. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for all the super chats. Taryn, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Arun Singh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it's all love. So mahalo again on this wacky Wednesday as we keep things Beast 100 all the time. That's it for now. Take care. BEASTwriter out.